Hey guys, and welcome back to A&J Education YouTube channel. In today's video, we're going to be talking about architecture as a career in the UK and what steps you need to do to become a paying architect in the United Kingdom. So if you're interested in architecture or just considering your careers, keep watching. All right, well, guys, I'm very fortunate to have my colleague Grant here back with us in the studio.
Hi.
Hi, Grant.
Hi.
So, Grant, look, how do you transition from being a 17-year-old school leaver to an architect who's being paid to do architecture work? Like, what's the what are the steps?
It's a long process. I think that's kind of the first point to make. Like, it will go on for a long time. So you'll do.
It's almost as difficult as medicine.
Yeah. You'll spend as many hours, I think, doing it as medicine. So I think you really do have to be doing it for you, most importantly. I think a lot of people do get kind of pushed into it. Maybe it's quite a respectable career, and I think it can be a good compromise for people. But I think when you actually look at the amount of time you'll be studying, you really have to be passionate about what you're doing. The steps are quite simple. Generally, you'll kind of finish your A levels or your IB. You'll finish your kind of earlier qualifications. Then you go on to do an undergrad. You'll do a little bit of experience in between normally, and then you'll go back and do a postgrad. Following that, you'll do a part 3 that you do whilst you're working, and then you'll get your qualification off that. You'll be an architect in the UK. It varies a bit from country to country, but in the UK, it's quite a defined process, and it's all set by RIBA, that's the Royal Institute of British Architects, and they keep everything very streamlined, very easy, very efficient to kind of keep up with, and they determine every step along the way, and they accredit degrees at university.
And so your undergrad is part 1, so that will be what, three years, right?
3 years undergrad, yeah.
Okay, and then you do part 2, that's also 3 years.
2 years normally. It depends.
2.
Again, 3 years in Scotland, 2 years in the UK.
Okay, in England.
I'll fact check that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's say 2 or 3 years in some cases.
Yeah.
And is that at the same university, or do you have to go to a different university?
It depends what you want, really. So you normally can get back into university quite easily if you're kind of familiar with how they've done the undergraduates. So myself, I did my undergrad and my postgrad at the Bartlett, so it's quite an easy process, kind of going back to what I was familiar with, what I was comfortable with. On the other hand, it gives you a really good opportunity to change culture in between. So if you didn't necessarily like where you did your undergrad, you have an opportunity to change that. Even if you really did like it, you've got an opportunity to see other places, how they work, or explore a new city. It's a lot of potential in between if you want to mix it up.
Interesting. So, and it sounds like part 2 architecture is a bit less stressful and less competitive, because for part 1 you're competing with a huge pool of people, but not all of them going to get into part 1 program. But for part 2, there is an identical number of part 2 spots as there are part 1 students. So
pretty much,
in a way, everyone should get somewhere.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the workload is obviously very different. I think the work you're focusing on is much harder at part 2. You really have to specialise and know what you're interested in. At part 1, you can be a little bit more open to ideas, I think. But yeah, in terms of getting back, in terms of the workflow, I think part 2 is definitely a little bit easier. It's easy to kind of have a life outside of it too. I think it's kind of expected that by the time you're doing a part 2, you might have more of a developed family, you might have other requirements in your life, so it works a lot better around that, I think.
Okay, and so you do your part 2, 3 years, and then what happens then?
So after your part 2, you would have probably already got a little bit of experience in architecture in between. So I did a year in industry in London. Some people might do a few years, some people might not do any time at all.
So when you say a year in, so is that part of your part 2, or is that like sandwiched in? But
it's sandwiched in the middle, and it like I said, it's kind of an optional thing. It's something you have to do before you get your complete qualification. And it can help you get back into your part 2. So a lot of people choose to do it in the middle because it's a good time to really develop those skills and see how what you've done in your part 1 can go on and be useful in the world, I think. But yeah, it is kind of optional. You can do it at the end if you prefer. And what you'll do, again, RIBA will kind of accredit that. So at the end of that, you'll basically write to them, you'll say, I've done this time in industry, they'll sign it off, and then that counts towards your overall qualification.
Okay, makes sense. So you've done that, and what about part 3?
So part 3, you do, I'm kind of a step before doing this in industry. So after you've got your postgrad qualification, you'll go back to a studio, doesn't really matter where, and you'll kind of work as a part 2 architect. And alongside that, you'll do a part 3 qualification through another university. So you won't necessarily be going in, you're not going to be doing that many lectures or courses or classes. You're going to be doing this based on a project that you're doing in industry.
And you're getting paid for that?
You're getting paid at the same time, which is good, but on the downside, it's a lot more hours. You're doing your job and then you're doing another degree on top of it, basically. But it's designed that you can manage these two things, basically. It's set up to do that quite well.
And how long does part 3 take?
It varies. Again, I'm kind of in the process where I'm just starting this, so I'm not overly familiar exactly, but I think it can be about a year. Normally it's set around a project that you're working on, so it depends on how long this project takes in industry.
And would you say it's, a lot of people stay in their Part 3 firm once, where they qualify?
I think so, yeah. Again, a bit like moving between places between Part 1 and Part 2 universities, you have an option if you want to try a new company or try a new style, really big company versus a pretty small company, for example. You can find what works best for you. A lot of people, whilst they're doing the Part 3, it's more comfortable just to stay in one place because you kind of understand how it works, you know the people. And I think that can go a long way, just being really familiar.
Okay, all right, makes sense. Great. And Grant, just in terms of the Part 3, Part 3 process. So, is every architecture firm affiliated with the university and can offer you that Part 3 training?
It will normally be distinct from where you've done your Part 2, basically. So some places might try and auto enroll you, basically. I know people that have come from London Met, for example, where they've started work and they've got a letter from London Met saying, you're ready to do your Part 3 now, come back and we'll do it alongside. Other places like the Bartlett, once you finish your Part 2, you're very much on your own to go and do it at your own pace and figure out where or how you want to do it.
Makes sense.
So yeah, there's a lot of freedom if you want it, but you can do it through the place you've done your Part 2 quite easily.
Okay. Got it. So it's not necessarily attached to the employer, it can be attached to...
It will be mainly through the university, yeah, but it will be a conversation between all of these people. And yeah, a lot of people have done it in the past. It's quite a well-trodden path. I wouldn't worry too much about the details of that.
Got it. And so you've done your Part 3, and then would you automatically get a qualification, or is there an exam? Or
pretty much, so there'll be an exam as part of that. But again, it's kind of at a much more gradual pace in university. You're not doing it full-time all day, every day, so you do it at the pace that you want. And then after that, you become accredited and you are an architect in the UK.
Great.
So easy, just a few years of your life.
Yeah, just a few years, of your life. And is it a similar process in Europe and America, would you know?
It varies a little bit. I think I know people that have started in the UK, so they've done their Part 1 and they've had to do a conversion basically to go and do their Part 2 or the Part 3 equivalents in the States. I'm not quite sure in Europe. I think, your mileage might vary a bit, but it's worth really looking into the exact routes or conversions. Typically, if you qualify in the UK, you're an architect in the UK, and you would have to do some kind of supplementary thing to go and work elsewhere. But it's definitely not doing the whole 7 years again. So there are easy ways to work globally if that's what you want to do.
Great. Grant, this has been a very useful, straightforward overview. I've certainly learned a lot. So, guys, if you're thinking of going into architecture, here is your overview. Other countries will vary, but not too much. But at least it gives you an idea of how UK does it. So, if that's what you're going to do, all the best to you. But for now, Grant, thank you very much for your time, guys. Just a reminder, please subscribe to this channel. We've invested a lot of time into making these videos as good and as useful for you as possible. So we'd really appreciate a subscribe. And if you have any questions or any sort of concerns about architecture, the best way to reach me is to tweet me on Twitter. And I do my best to reply to all messages and tweets. So do connect with me there. But for now, all the best to you. Good luck and see you soon.
Good luck.